So I'm back with more on communication. We'll take a look at the functions of communication. So in animals, what is communication used for? There's a huge list, right? Here are some of the major functions. Communication can be simply used to identify species or sex or specific individuals. So 3-spine and 4-spine stickleback are two species of stickleback fish that live in the same area and breed at almost the same time. But the 3-spine and the 4-spine male courtship behaviors are quite different. This allows communication about what species the fish is. So a male 3-spine stickleback will do a series of darts toward the female, darting back and forth in front of the female. We call those courtship behaviors zigzags. The male 4-spine stickleback will do a circle dance where he swims repeatedly around the female, around and around, to try to court her. And so this would be a way of for the females to identify, there's a male of my species. And it's a male because he's doing courtship, particular male courtship behaviors, if you will. Individuals are also identified in birds, for example, by their specific songs, or in, like I said, the electric fishes that I was talking about can actually make their own signal to identify their own song. I mean, their own person, their own animal person. Okay, individual recognition is an example. Another example of individual recognition is a study done in 1970s by Falls and Brooks on white-throated sparrows. These are birds that you might see at your bird feeders, and they're very good at recognizing their neighbors by song. So they set up little territories, right? So there'll be residents of a territory and there'll be neighbors nearby in their own territories. A resident responds to a stranger's song on tape much more aggressively than it responds to a neighbor's song. And if a neighbor's song is played in a different spot where the neighbor doesn't normally live, then the resident will respond aggressively. Like, hey, that's not normal. That's not my neighbor. At least that's not my neighbor in the right location. Individuals can even use communication to recognize kin. So tadpoles of the American toad prefer to associate with their siblings than with their non-siblings. How do they recognize each other? Possibly olfactory cues? We're not even sure. This happens, by the way, even if they're raised in isolation. So there's some form of communication there that says, hey, I'm your kin. Probably olfaction. Communication can function clearly in reproduction as well. Many animals have striking displays, courtship displays. So either visual or auditory or combination, ritualized courtship displays. Fishes and birds in particular are very good at them. These ritualized courtship displays helps to identify a species. It helps to assess individual condition. Hey, I'm bright red and I can dance really fast. I am a good quality male of high condition, if you will. You want to mate with me. It also helps animals to coordinate their neurological systems so that they're both prepared to mate at the same time and so that the mating will be successful. Female 3-spine stickleback actually participate in the courtship behavior as well. It's not just all about what the males do. The females come into a male's territory and with a really arched back and with a big belly of eggs sticking out. Their posture then is kind of with their snout upright and their belly down, and that helps to signal the male that, ooh, I see a female who is ready to mate, and I'm going to go court her, right? It's a part of this courtship series between the male and the female. They kind of play their roles, and that helps coordinate reproduction, successful reproduction. Communication can tell individuals about aggressive interactions, or it can tell them about social status, who's dominant in a population, for example. A lot of times aggressive displays, threat displays will help communicate information about who's in charge, who's dominant, what is the hierarchy in this population, without leading to an all-out fight. This is very common in crayfish. Crayfish will set up little territories, feeding territories, and they establish hierarchies, dominance hierarchies amongst the members in a given area. But they don't usually fight themselves to the death. They will engage in short interactions and identify essentially by these threat displays, these short interactions of aggression, who is in charge or who is dominant, and then they will leave each other alone. It's one way to take the place of all-out fighting. We also have a video assignment on aggression and the weaponry that animals have, as they communicate about social status, for example, and it's a pretty cool video to watch. Animals communicate alarms. They alert group members to danger. So I've got this little picture here of vervet monkeys that actually have very different kinds of signals to communicate different kinds of dangers in their environment. So they have a leopard alarm call. When they make it, all the other animals will jump up into the tree. They have a snake alarm call. When they make it, the animals will stand up real tall, looking around for the snake. And they have an eagle alarm call that elicits kind of a freezing behavior and a looking up, like, oh no, where is that eagle coming from, right? This is semantic communication. It's communication that tells the animals, hey, an eagle's coming. I see a snake. A leopard is there. Animals communicate about hunting and communicate in finding food. So a lot of animals, especially animals that use groups to hunt, need to cooperate, and this involves some significant communications. Wild dogs in Africa, for example, before a hunt, will engage in all sorts of strange behaviors, like nosing each other and lip licking and tail wagging and circling around each other. This may help these animals coordinate their hunting activities so that they can be more successful hunting. Other animals, like bees, will actually communicate to each other, to other workers in the hive, about where they found food and how far away it is, using very specific kinds of dances. And you can look these up on videos, but the bees have circle dances and wiggle dances, and they can communicate exactly where the food is based on the length of the dance and the way that the dance is performed. It's amazing. Communication about giving and soliciting care. So birds, for example, the young birds that are still in the nest will signal for food by begging, right? The kind of, if you remember that example of the herring gull, the young will peck at the herring gull adults' bills, right at that red spot. Hey, I'm hungry, feed me. Primates will lift their arms and grab. The young will lift their arms up and grab their adult. Insects can even solicit care. This is a great one. Termite young will tap feeders to get food from them. So you can imagine little termites saying, I'm hungry, feed me. We communicate. Communication facilitates performance. This is interesting. Having an audience is interesting because it motivates members to perform differently. Researchers are focusing in with animals on the presence of an audience, how does the presence of an audience, a watcher, affect, say, courtship behavior in guppies or in stickleback or in other types of fish? How does the presence of an audience affect aggression in or an aggressive contest? Does it matter? If you've got two jumping spiders fighting each other and there's a female nearby, does that affect their behavior? Does it make them more aggressive, less aggressive? Does it make them fight for longer? The presence of an audience can affect individuals. That's kind of interesting. We know that in humans, the presence of an audience facilitates performance. So when you have an audience, you're more likely to play a sport better. Well, we've seen that left and right with COVID, haven't we? Anyway, this is something that's interesting. Communication can be all about soliciting play behavior. So play behavior is one of these strange behaviors that animals have. Like, we find play in almost all young animals. So there must be some functions for play. We're not sure exactly what the functions are, but we have some ideas. Young can communicate their interest in play, right? Play bows in dogs, play faces in primates that say, hey, I want to play. Anyway, there are other examples too. So you might use communication for navigating, for example. When you think about migration in a lot of species, or just moving around territories, like elephants communicate about where they're going in their territory. Yeah. What about functions of communication in humans? Well, let's go back to this list, right? I mean, we communicate for all of these reasons. Right? We also have to remember that communication is not just verbal. We make a lot of our communication via nonverbal means. I'm not sure, how much of our communication is nonverbal versus verbal. But nonverbal communication plays a really important role in how we communicate with each other. But think about what we do. We communicate to meet our needs, right? To meet our physical needs, like our practical needs, to obtain food, to find a shelter, to maintain a job, those kinds of practical, physical needs. We communicate to meet our social needs, to find a mate, to get affection, to be included, to express our emotions and our interpersonal attitudes. And we communicate to meet our identity needs. Our communication helps us understand who we are. Nonverbal communication can be used to help meet all of these needs as well, right? And nonverbal communication helps us to express our emotions, our attitudes, to show our personality, who we are, to in rituals, nonverbal communication is pretty important too, in greetings, for example, lots of other things, right? So, we're like animals in a lot of ways. We communicate about all of these things and perhaps additionally some of our identity needs. All right, we'll move on in the next video to talk about deceit and illegitimate receivers.